Hello and welcome. This is Dan Explains, hosted by me, Dan. Just a second. Wow, that's better. Okay. Something lots of Christians tend to glaze over, but parents often have to deal with this question: who did Adam and Eve's children marry? It just kind of glazes over that in the book of Genesis. They'd have to somehow marry people they weren't related to, right? Well, no. Let me explain why. Before you shoot off some comment that Dan believes this or that nutty thing, I'd like to point out this video is conjecture, and there is much more to the story than this. I'm going to make a lot of videos on things that are possible explanations for various unanswered questions in both faith and science. Some of my ideas may be mutually exclusive. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. This is an interesting thought and provides a possible solution to at least one of the conundrums in the Bible. When I was a kid, the question of who Adam and Eve's children married was definitely a question in my mind. I thought the idea of them marrying each other was gross. Although at the time I didn't understand well the reason why relatives marrying each other was bad. Just that offspring would be messed up. When I took genetics in college, the issue became much more clear. So I'm going to go over a little bit about how that works. Most people are probably aware from high school biology that most living things have 2 copies of each chromosome. One of each from their father and one of each from their mother. With the exception of the Y and X chromosomes anyway, which determine whether we end up male or female. The biggest reason and advantage to have 2 copies of each chromosome is redundancy. If you have ever had to rely on something you could only afford one of, you can probably understand the reason why redundancy is important. Ever had your only car break down? Your furnace break? Or your only fridge fail? Well, your chromosomes are basically the books containing the instructions that make you. So if you have 2 copies from different sources, if something is missing from one copy, the correct instruction will likely be found in the other. So you think there would be a risk that some 50% of the chromosomes you have would be duplicated in your sibling, because each of you had a 50-50 chance of getting either one from either parent. If this were the case, however, any child who was the offspring of siblings wouldn't survive till birth, because our 2 copies of each chromosome cover for each other's defects really well. Of course, people have probably all heard what really happens. Most of the time, the offspring of the 2 siblings only have a few issues. It's an issue that gets worse and worse with every subsequent generation. After 2 or 3 generations, all the offspring no longer survive. The reason for this is because the chromosomes that the parents contribute to their children are not just a copy of one of the pairs they inherited from their parents. Our eggs and sperm actually shuffle the genetic deck between the pairs of chromosomes. After, we have to make 2 new cells with 1 set of chromosomes each. Those chromosomes now being a mix of our parents' chromosomes. So, what does this all have to do with Adam and Eve's children, right? If you remember from the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve and their offspring all lived a super long time. The Bible doesn't go into the biological detail, obviously. It just says here and there that the human life has been shortened as time goes on. Generally, sin is given as the reason. However, it's possible the long lives of the people in the book of Genesis and their ability to intermarry relatives are related. When God created Adam and Eve, they weren't fallen yet, and He created them so they would be biologically immortal. It was when they sinned and got kicked out of the garden that they became mortal. I'm going to go over that in a minute, but at that point, Adam and Eve were essentially genetically perfect. So their children would be nearly as genetically perfect as them. The result of this, of course, is that their children and their children's children and their children's children and so on could intermarry each other for generations to come without having any issues. They simply had no bad genes to pass on in their chromosomes. Of course, as the generations went by, mutations would happen, knocking out genes and causing genetic drift. Due to this, people would age more quickly as generations went on. Our lifespans would eventually shrink down to pretty much the minimum required for us to pass on our genes. Although it hasn't quite done that yet. We actually live 20 to 30 years longer than makes biological sense, which could be a byproduct of this. There's also a lot more to this age thing that I'll save for another video. So one thing you should be asking yourself is, why isn't Adam and Eve walking the earth to this day? They're genetically perfect, right? They were made that way. They should be as young as the day that God made them, right? Well, there's also somatic mutation as well. Basically, that is a mutation that happens to the cells of your body after conception and build up over time. Now I suppose Adam and Eve would have had perfect cellular metabolisms, so oxidative stress wouldn't have been the cause of the mutation and aging for them as it is for us, at least not at first. However, without the protection of the Garden of Eden and living in the now imperfect world, they would be getting hit by things like radiation from the sun, cosmic rays from deep space, radioactive decay from heavy elements in the environment, etc. This would age them slowly at first, but it would pick up speed the older they got, as their cells accumulated more and more mutations. Of course, even if that weren't the issue, they probably would have died in an accident or something eventually, but anyway. Now, you'd think we'd see this in modern human DNA, and the answer to that is, well, yes and no. There are certainly other things to unravel here, like Neanderthal DNA being discovered in our DNA. Obviously, more material for more videos. The first few generations after Adam and Eve would have seen an accelerated mutation rate, as the genes that didn't contribute to a significant advantage to their children would have been rapidly lost in each successive generation. It would slow down more and more as each mutation had a more significant chance at causing an issue. When trying to look at this stuff, there's an additional issue of the possible crossing with other human species like Neanderthals and Denisovans, which, as studies have indicated, could have also brought a lot of broken genes. To get back to the original point, by the time inbreeding would start to become an issue, there were enough different people with different enough DNA that interbreeding wasn't required anymore. Remember, it's not necessarily how different your DNA is that protects you from inbreeding. It's how many broken genes you share. So, is there any way for scientists to prove this? If you've watched my second video, link in the description, you'd know I'm going to answer a no on that one. You may have noticed I got my new equipment. My video and sound should be noticeably better. A few people told me that they didn't like the cloud background, that minus the planet, which is art done by myself, was a picture taken by me from a plane. At any rate, some people told me they didn't like the cloud background, so I'm going to try the woods. This here is an exact view of the trees behind where I'm sitting, since there's a window. However, this is just much easier since the light coming in from the window drowns me out. I've also created lots of blooper videos as well to watch, but I only share those with my patrons, which at this point is 0 people. But if you sign up on Patreon on the $5 level, you can watch my blooper videos. There are also exclusive channels in the Discord chats for the patrons as well to give me feedback at any of the donation levels. Link in the description. Anyway, if you like this video, please press the like button, subscribe to my channel, and ding the bell to get notified when I post new videos. So, until next time, have a great week.